Rabia, you have a brand new podcast out all about mysteries and true crime. So, what's a Pakistani mystery that you can share with us today?
Well, there was actually a podcast that came out, I think about a year ago called Notes on a Scandal, which was maybe the very first Pakistani true crime podcast. And I was
All
riveted. And it
right.
was about, yeah, it was amazing. And it was not a case that I was aware of. And frankly, I'm not aware of that many. There's enough true crime in America to keep me busy. But this
Yes.
was about the murder suicide apparent of a very famous Pakistani poet in Karachi, which is one of the major, Karachi is like our New York. It's one of the major cities in Pakistan. And he was just a very well known socialite in the 1970s and 60s. And his name was Mustafa Zaidi. And he was having he was married. He was having a very public affair with another married person, this woman named Shanaz Gul, also a socialite. And we're talking about like super upper echelons of society, the kinds of people that like my middle class family doesn't even know. But, the kind of people who could carry out a public affair and get away with it. But apparently, she was trying to end it and he would not allow that to happen. He started stalking her. And then he told her he had made all these flyers of a photograph of her nude. So revenge porn in 1970 we're talking
Wow.
about. Anyhow, shortly thereafter, he was found murdered and she was found in the next room also saying that she had been beaten and hurt. And, people said that, she set him up. She had him murdered because of the revenge porn thing. And it was just never clear whether he was murdered or he committed suicide. And so it's a really interesting case. And it also it's like it covers a side of Pakistani society that people don't even realize exist. Like this real elite socialite circles. So that it's a good true crime mystery, and you can find it on any podcast app. Again, it's called Notes on a Scandal.
Notes on a Scandal. I love that. So,
Yeah.
originally, when I was thinking, I always do this thing where I immediately ask my guests a question sort of around tailored to sort of their expertise. Obviously, we'll get to your expertise here in a second, Rabia.
Yeah.
But I wanted to know if there was like some sort of true crime mystery about Pakistan, and I was hoping that you would have one, and you delivered so well. That was such a fascinating story, and I'm absolutely going to go check out that.
I will say
podcast
this.
after.
Another very kind of ongoing important true crime thread in Pakistan is that our leaders keep getting assassinated. We've
Oh
lost a
yeah,
lot of leaders to assassination. I don't know if there's been a single prime minister that has actually lived out their term one way or the other. In fact, I believe there hasn't been. So that's one enduring mystery, is that who keeps killing all the leaders.
oh boy, that is probably
Yeah.
very complex.
Yeah.
Well, welcome to Around the World with Geoff. We are talking all about Pakistan today. And this is the podcast where we explore all of the countries, all of the places, all the cities and states and provinces of the world, one episode at a time. And of course, I always like to have a guest who can speak to that place a little bit, who can share some of their experience with it. And today I am delighted to introduce Rabia Chaudry, an attorney, an author, and a podcaster who you might know from the very famous Serial podcast, to join me here today. Rabia, how are you? And if you can share a little bit about sort of where you're from, sort of your experience with Pakistan, where you're from, all that kind of stuff.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Geoff. And I think it's serendipity that today happens to be Pakistan's Independence Day. We are recording on August 14th. Pakistan turns 77 today. It's a young country. I am, in fact, from Pakistan. I was born in Lahore, Pakistan. It is one of the most ancient cities. I mean, the whole region is ancient, but it is a very old city. It's one of the I think 7 famous walled cities. Has one of those famous ancient walled cities in the world. And I was born in Pakistan, and my parents immigrated to the U.S. in the 1970s. And when I got here, I think I was around maybe 7, 8 months old. So yeah, I mean, right now I'm based outside of the DC area in the Maryland suburbs, and I've lived most of my life in Maryland or the DC area.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. So you are very correct in that Pakistan has been a fruitful bed of ancient civilizations for far longer than I think most people expect. And we're going to talk a little bit about that later today. For now, let's go ahead and ground ourselves in sort of where Pakistan even is, because, well, I mean, every place has a place in this world, and not everybody knows where every place is, unlike me, the nerdy geographer, podcaster, and YouTuber. So, Rabia, can you tell us a little bit about where Pakistan is located and sort of how it sits inside the world geographically?
Yeah, Pakistan is a South Asian country. It is probably the most Western on the western end of what is considered South Asia on the Indian subcontinent. So a lot of people are like, what is Pakistan? Where is Pakistan? We have not heard of this one stan. There's a lot of stans out there, Afghanistan and all these other stans. Whereas Pakistan, but it was India up until 78 years ago. It was part of India. So in 1947, India was partitioned at the end of the rule of the British Raj, and Pakistan came into existence in 1947. And so it is bordered by India on the west. You have China on the north, and on the west you have, I'm trying to get all my directions straight. You have Iran and Afghanistan. So you've got the Silk Route just all throughout it. And because, up north you have China bordering it, from there all the way down to the south where it hits the Indian Ocean and the deserts began. I mean, very, very different landscapes and cultures and languages, and and lots of different kinds of ethnicities and peoples live in Pakistan.
Yeah, you nailed it. It is in South Asia, which would include the India, it would include Bangladesh, it would include Bhutan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, and the Maldives. And yeah, Pakistan is in that very far western corner of the South Asian region. You mentioned it already that Pakistan was sort of broken out of India based on sort of the colonial empire. There is something that just sort of like talk about, let's address it. Pakistan and India, not really what we would consider to be friends today geopolitically. What's going on there? How do Pakistanis sort of feel about India in general? Or is there a lot of contention, or is it sort of just all politics?
Yeah, I mean, things change all the time. It all depends on what administrations are in power. There have been times when India and Pakistan have been very close. There have been times when they have been at war, like 1967. There have been times where there are skirmishes, especially up north in Kashmir, where Kashmir is a disputed region. Pakistanis believe that the part of Kashmir that's in India is occupied by the military. It's an occupied territory, and it's not even a belief. I mean, the military does occupy it, and then you have, but this is of course is bias. We call the part of Kashmir in Pakistan the Free Kashmir. Okay, so there are of course there are disputes over resources and water sources because India has the power to close off dams when they want, or to open up dams, and like that causes flood. Like there's a lot of different issues like that impact, they're so close, right? I mean, they share a border, but at the same time, there have been times when the countries are so close that there's like a lot of Pakistani actors and singers go to Bollywood, and Bollywood is a huge film and entertainment industry, and have performed and starred in Bollywood movies and done albums with stars there. And then this current government came into power, the BJP under Indian Prime Minister Modi, and they're pretty right wing. And so they actually banned Pakistani actors and they forced them out. Yeah. And they're like, no, if any Indian film director hires them, like you're going to get your house burned down or something. Wow. In fact, some film sets were bombed by some right wingers. So that kind of ended that. But having said that, social media is incredible. It's watching people like connect constantly online, despite where the governments happen to be or what's happening like between like political stuff and militarily, because all down that border on both sides, we are sharing food and culture and language, and we consume their media and they consume our media, because not that long ago we were literally the same people. Right. So I think when it comes to like just getting down to like the average person, people are like, they're fine. And there is a train that goes straight from Delhi to Lahore for Indian visitors, and another train that goes to a city in Pakistan called Kartarpur specifically for Sikh pilgrims. They can come in get a day pass. And anything I've seen on social media where a lot of Indians have returned to Pakistan, like older Indians looking for where their ancestors used to live before they were displaced in 47, and have been welcomed quite warmly by Pakistanis. It is much harder to get a visa to India, though, if you're Pakistani. It is almost impossible.
That is fascinating and kind of unfortunate. I guess I shouldn't be surprised. I did a little bit of research on other topics around India and sort of the BJP and sort of the nationalistic rhetoric that sort of has been rising. And so I guess as you're saying this, I'm like, unfortunately, it's not surprising. Like I didn't know that Pakistani directors and actors, for example, no longer allowed to work in Bollywood.
Yeah.
But I'm also not surprised, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But, like the political winds change, and who knows, this could turn around. Like and be like it was 10, 12 years ago. I mean, so, but it is a matter of politics and not the people.
Yeah. Yeah, and what you were saying about the border and like the people who live on both sides of it, but like to them, they're still neighbors. They're still sharing sort of the same land. They're still sharing a lot of the same resources and the same issues. I was talking with somebody from Portugal a few weeks ago for the same podcast, and while I would never compare Pakistan and India with Portugal and Spain directly, he had a very similar sentiment as we were talking about Portugal's relationship with Spain, and he's like, well, you go to these towns, sort of on the border of either Spain or Portugal, and they don't recognize people across the border as being different from them, really,
Right.
in any degree, because
Yeah.
to them, the border is just a political boundary that doesn't really impact them all that much. That could be a little bit different with Pakistan just being sort of maybe there's a hardening of that border now, but still the
Oh,
sentiments are there. Yeah.
yeah. No, definitely. I mean, look, we're literally eating the same food, wearing the same clothing, talking the same
Right.
language, listening to the same music, have the same history, shared history.
Exactly.
So, and
Yeah.
we're not far out enough from that history for it not to matter. I mean, and we will always, nobody's changing their cultural customs, anytime soon. So we're always going to have that in common. And, there are villages that they can just wave at each other and see each other, and they will do that. And, I have a bunch of folks in my family in the military, in the Pakistani military on my mom's side. And they've told me, because they have guards, they'll have the military on different border crossings and across, and they're like the guards are always like sending food to each other and like waving and joking and talking. And there's a really interesting there's a border crossing in Lahore called the Wagah border, and
Mhm.
every single day around sunset there is this entire very ceremonious kind of dance where they do to there's this huge gate that they close between the borders. And to close that gate first, there's this Indian guard and Pakistani guard, huge men. And they come and they do this whole like military dance where they're like stomping and like showing off how much, strong they are. And the whole thing is choreographed between India and Pakistan. And then you
Right.
have people sitting on both sides cheering for their country. It's a lot of fun. It's a complete show. It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
But these are people who are like, oh yeah, how's your dad doing, and when's your girl getting married? And I'm like, they're so there's just no way to dissolve that. I don't care what happens politically. You're never going to break these ties.
Well, we've already started talking a little bit about the population, sort of some of the cultural elements of Pakistan. So let's go. We're going to go ahead and dive a little bit deeper into that. But before we do that, Rabia, we have to do our very first ad break so we
Okay.
can, monetize this a little bit and support
Sure.
the podcast and all that fun stuff. So, all that said, we will be right back. Around the World is sponsored by BetterHelp. Self-care is important to all of us. Personally, I love going for long walks every day just to decompress and think about how my day has gone. But while walking is great, it's my weekly therapy sessions that really keep me on track throughout the week. And BetterHelp has made therapy more convenient than ever. BetterHelp is entirely online, which means it's very accessible, flexible, and can be adapted to your schedule. You don't need to travel to an office across town. You can do it right from where you're most comfortable, your home. When I first started thinking about doing therapy, I kept pushing it back simply because I didn't think I had the time. But being able to do it virtually meant that I didn't have any excuse holding me back anymore. And now that I've started, I don't think I could manage my workload and stress without it. So never skip therapy day again with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/aroundtheworld today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/aroundtheworld. And we're back. This is the Around the World podcast. We're talking all about Pakistan with Rabia Chaudry. We started talking about some population, some culture stuff within Pakistan, sort of the relationship between India and Pakistan. Let's focus back in on just Pakistan. We'll leave the neighbors behind a little bit. Rabia, quick question for you, and you're not necessarily expected to know the answer, but maybe you'll have it off the top of your head. Do you know how many people live within Pakistan today?
I recently learned that it is close to 300 million. I think around 280 million. Is that right?
You're overshooting a little bit, but you're not
Okay.
completely outside of the realm of sort of, what the estimates say. So as of 2023, there's about 241 million people within the country.
Oh,
And so
okay.
this would make it a really large country by
Yeah.
population. In fact, it would be the fifth largest country in the world by population, just below the country of Indonesia
Mm.
and just above the country of Nigeria. For people who just want to compare it to something that maybe they know, a lot of my listeners are from the United States. So the United States has a population of about 335 million. I do
Dang.
believe, yeah,
We're
I know,
not
right?
far behind. We're not far behind. I
No.
mean, and I feel like you're not even probably this what's it called? The census is probably missing so many people,
Well,
like villagers and stuff.
that's exactly
Oh,
what I was going to say. So
yeah,
any sort of census, regardless of where it's coming from, like I always like to say this, like these are all estimates, right?
yeah,
Nobody's like, even your most detailed census is not going out and counting each individual person. Like there are going to be people left out. Here in the United States, there's a decennial census that's not going to count every single person. At
yeah,
some point, there's some estimation coming in. So certainly with, a lot of different countries, there's the amount that's being estimated is probably wildly off in some degree. So
yeah.
to your point, Rabia, there could be 280 million people because there's just whole villages and whole parts of the country that might just not really be counted or something like that.
Yeah,
A
and,
reality.
yeah, and I mean, even culturally, I wonder, I mean, given I don't it depends on how the census is taken, are people mailing it in? People in Pakistan, I'm guessing they have census workers going door to door, but guess what? They're probably also being underreported because there
Right.
is kind of there's this cultural thing, not everywhere, maybe not in the cities so much, but certainly in smaller towns and villages, where they're like, you don't need to know how many women live in our home. Like very, very protective of like the girls and women.
Interesting.
So they might just be like, we're not even reporting them. Nobody needs to know that information, not the government for sure. So I don't know, but I will say this. For sure, there's a lot of Pakistanis in Pakistan and in the world, and it explains why nearly everywhere you go, even in America, you'll find Pakistanis. I remember one time I was in Switzerland driving through the Alps, and we needed gas, and we found a remote gas station, and the gas station owners were Pakistani. I'm like, this makes total sense to me. We're everywhere.
I mean, I love the idea that there's like just a Pakistani family owning a gas station in Switzerland. And
Yeah.
I don't know why. It just seems so. I can't even tell you why that seems like it shouldn't be the case, but it's not what I would expect ever. But it's true. It's like
Gas
you
station
can find,
mafia with the Pakistanis.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm here on the West Coast of the United States. I wouldn't say, necessarily, within California, Washington, or Oregon, there's a huge Pakistani population or a dominant sort of population of Pakistanis, but it's also not uncommon, right?
Yeah.
I know Pakistani people here in Portland.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Oh no, I mean like Southern California, SoCal is full of
Oh, yeah.
Pakistanis. Oh yeah, tons of them. Yeah, they're there. They
Well,
like the warm weather. Yeah,
well, speaking of villages and towns, let's look at the opposite end of that spectrum, the largest cities within Pakistan. Rabia, would you be able to list off some of these top 5-ish cities that you might
yeah.
think would be,
I'm
in terms of population, of course?
yeah, I'm pretty sure. I'm guessing Karachi or Lahore are number one. One of those two has to be number one.
That is number
Lahore is
1 and number 2.
they're number one and number two, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So Karachi, because it's a port city, like I said at the earlier, it's like our New York. Everybody from the region flocks to Karachi for jobs and business, and so that's why it's heavily populated. Lahore, because it's the heart of Punjab, and Punjab is the biggest province in Pakistan. There's like 6 provinces in Pakistan. It is the biggest province. It has the most wealth. It's the breadbasket of the country. It's got the biggest economy, and just most Pakistanis are Punjabi. Like and I am Punjabi, and so we're the biggest ethnic group in Punjab. So Lahore and Karachi have to be two of the top ones. I am not actually. Maybe Multan is number 3. I wonder
Hmm.
who Peshawar maybe. I'm not sure about the others. I just know those two for sure make the list on
Yeah.
top.
So the other two that you just mentioned aren't on my top 5 list,
Oh,
but maybe you'll recognize some of these. I did do a little bit of sort of Googling around as I was learning about these different things.
sure.
But number 3 would be a city called Faisalabad.
Faisalabad.
Faisal? Yeah.
Faisalabad. Yeah, I have family in Faisalabad. I didn't know they were that big. They're also in Punjab. Makes sense. Okay.
It is significantly smaller. So Karachi has about 15 million people, Lahore about 11.1 million people.
Okay.
Uh, Faisalabad would be about 3.2 million. So it's significantly
Okay.
smaller, right? You're
Yeah.
taking a step down. And then the other two in the top 5, they each have about 2 million people. There will be, I'm going to mispronounce these.
Okay.
I
I'm here to
always
fix
do.
that pronunciation.
It's Rawalpindi. Rawalpindi.
Rawalpindi. Rawalpindi. That makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah. Oh, I totally forgot about Rawalpindi. It's huge. Yeah, for sure. Again, in Punjab. So you've got 3 Punjabi cities already in the top list. Okay.
I'm noticing a trend here. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then number 5 would be Gujranwala. Gujranwala?
Gujranwala.
Yeah.
Gujranwala. Again, Punjab. Yeah, makes
So
total
aside from,
sense.
it sounds like, aside from Karachi, it sounds like these are all Punjab.
It's all Punjab. Yeah. Yeah.
That's starting to feel like a very dense region in terms of population
It is,
for
but it's
Pakistan.
also, yeah, I mean, like you have densely populated areas and obviously a lot of urban spread too. I mean, I still remember when we would visit Pakistan when I was a kid, what my grandparents' neighborhoods looked like. And they would just be like quiet, empty kind of suburban neighborhoods. And now they're just like, I mean, it's like people living on top of it. It's, gotten so
Yeah,
congested. So, because again, people are coming for work and all that. But having said that, because Punjab is like the breadbasket, if you drive through Punjab, and I did that on a bus tour like earlier this year, you'll just go for hours and hours of just fields and tiny little villages. And we are city people, so we don't come from a
yeah.
village. I've actually never even, I've visited a village, but I've never really lived in a village. So yeah, there are dense population centers, but a lot of Punjab is just rural.
That's not that surprising. I guess once you get outside of some of these really large cities, I'm sure things get really sparse really quickly.
Yeah.
One thing I was surprised about, Rabia, was that Islamabad, the capital of Pakistan, is not that populated. It's actually,
Yeah.
it ranked number 9. There's just a little over 1 million people. Have you ever been there? What's
Oh
going on
yeah.
there?
I've been there plenty of times. I've even done some work there. I was working on some State Department projects, but I have family out there. Islamabad is the capital. It's where all the foreigners are, all the embassies, the foreign
Right.
embassies are
Yep.
there. It is very much a town geared towards people from outside the country. It's very safe, very clean, very
Mhm.
expensive, very secure. And like by 6 o'clock, everything shuts down. And like I'm not kidding. Cafes and restaurants and malls, like 6, 7 o'clock, everything shut down. The rest of Pakistan wakes up at 7 p.m. Like Lahore wakes up, when the sun goes down. So it's very different, but it's also meant for a very different class of people
It's
from
like,
like
yeah,
Germany, like Europe, America. There's a lot of NGOs operate there, and there's a very heavy military presence out there too, because it's the capital.
right. It sounds very bureaucratic. Dare I say, maybe a little boring
Yeah,
to
it's boring.
visit.
It's beautifully manicured. And yeah, but it's not that big. But Rawalpindi is actually right next to it. And the minute you enter
Okay.
into Rawalpindi, it's like chaos. It's like donkeys and chickens, and it's absolute utter chaos. And it's also a very ancient city. So it's a really interesting contrast because they're so close together.
As you're describing this, it sounds very similar to Brasilia, which is the capital of Brazil.
Okay.
And it's interesting because, and I was reading up on Islamabad, which was only built in 1967. It was tailor built to become the capital of Pakistan.
Yeah.
Brasilia was also tailor built to become the capital of Brazil. And
Mm.
I've heard very similar things about Brasilia in that it's everything shuts down, it's really gets
Yeah.
really boring.
Yeah.
And what I thought was really funny was that people in Brazil, all of like the bureaucrats and politicians, everything, they would just fly back every night. They would just fly back to Sao Paulo or Rio de Janeiro instead of staying there. And they was just like,
I
okay,
remember
good night.
one time I was in Islamabad and I was like, I want to get some KFC. We go to because KFC and McDonald's. I mean, all of our fast food chains have infiltrated Pakistan for years now. I went to get some KFC and it was
Oh
like
boy.
8 p.m. and the KFC was closed at 8 p.m. I'm like, this is not natural for KFC. So I knew I was like, I'm just gonna be hungry tonight. No, it's not a fun city, but it's a pretty place, I guess.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite city in Pakistan?
Oh, Lahore. I mean, look, it's not just because it's my birth city, but it is. But also, there's a saying that if you haven't seen Lahore, you haven't been born yet. And there's a reason for that. Lahore is an incredible, incredible city. It is such a center of culture, heritage. It's like a 1,200-year-old university is there. Like the oldest university in the entire Indian subcontinent is in Lahore. Literature, art. It is absolutely beautiful. And the food is amazing. So my ex's family is from Karachi and he had been there when he was a kid. He was born and raised in Canada, but he went there as a kid. And I was like, after we got married, I was like, we should go to Pakistan. He's like, ew, no, I've been to Karachi. I'm like, no, Lahore is not Karachi. Karachi is like New York. It's fast, it's loud, it's dirty.
Mhm.
But Lahore is different. And when I took him for the first time, he was like, I don't want to leave. I'm adopting
Oh,
this as my
wow.
own city. So hands down, Lahore.
Well, hold on to that thought. We're going to talk all about sort of like some tourist stuff, visitor stuff here in a
Okay.
minute. For now, Rabia, we're going to jump to another ad break. We're going to come back. We're going to talk about the topography of Pakistan. It is very diverse, and we're going to talk a little about what's actually going on there, what's on the land. And yeah, I guess, well, listen to some ads, listener, and we will be right back. As many of you know, I recently opened up my very own online map store, but I had never set up my own store before, and after looking it up, it got complicated really fast. That's why I went with Shopify for my store. They made it so easy. Here's how. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your online shop stage to the first real life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit 1 million orders stage? Shopify's there to help you grow. Whether you're selling maps like me or something else entirely, Shopify helps you sell everywhere. From their all-in-one e-commerce platform to their in-person POS system, wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. Shopify helps you turn browsers into buyers with the internet's best converting checkout, 36% better on average compared to other leading commerce platforms. And you can sell more with less effort thanks to Shopify Magic, your AI-powered all-star. I'm a content creator and podcaster, not a salesperson or computer programmer. So setting up an online map store would have been incredibly challenging to do on top of all of the content I make, were it not for Shopify's easy-to-use tools. And you can get yours set up today as well for $1. Sign up for a 1-month trial at shopify.com/ATW, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/ATW now to grow your business. That's shopify.com/ATW, all lowercase. And we're back. This is the Around the World podcast. We're talking all about Pakistan with my guest here today, Rabia Chaudry. We just ran through some cities. We actually just talked about one of your favorite cities, Lahore. For now, let's leave the cities behind. Let's talk about sort of the land, the topography, what's actually happening within Pakistan. Can you tell us a little bit about the landscape or physical features from where you're from or what you're most familiar with within Pakistan?
Yeah, I mean, look, because I'm a city girl. My parents are city people. You go to Lahore, the heart of Lahore. Actually, the very heart of Lahore is the old city. That's the walled part of the city I mentioned earlier, where like there's these ancient walls, and many of them still exist. And there were like 9 gates to the city. Many of those gates still exist, but it's full of a bazaar now. So the whole thing is this tiny, crowded little bazaar. And we're talking about that area is maybe, I don't know, 1800 years old. And then as you get further out, it's less populated, but there are just so many fancy shopping centers. And I mean, like I said, you can go to a KFC or a fancy coffee shop. It's a lot. I mean, like when I take my kids, we're Ubering everywhere and we're Uber eating food to the Airbnb. It doesn't feel a lot different other than just like the climate and stuff from being America. All those creature comforts are there. But if I venture like an hour out or even half an hour out from Lahore, you're going to see fields. It's agricultural. It's mostly flat, but it's a really rich farm area. And then 4 hours, and Punjab and Lahore, they're located in about the center of the country if you go from north to south.
Mm-hmm.
So as you go north, and I haven't gone all the way up north, but next summer I do plan to. I'm taking a tour all the way up to the north, the very northern regions. Hanza, Gilgit-Baltistan, it's called the Switzerland of Pakistan, and the footage is unreal. And, people who visited are like, it's incredible. A lot of it, there's a lot more like building in terms of resorts and accommodations because it's becoming a tourist thing. And there's a lot of European and American vloggers and stuff going up there and making videos now. And I'm like, dang, they got there before I did. It's beautiful. It's scenic. It's mountainous. It's incredibly beautiful. And then when you go south and Punjab ends and Sindh begins. And Sindh is where Karachi starts, but also the Cholistan desert begins. It's a huge, vast desert. What I'm wearing right now is a Sindhi topi. It's called a Sindhi hat. It's a very particular hat, only worn and made in that region. But I bought one when I was on my tour last week. Like Punjabis don't wear them, but they're cute. So we're talking about the desert all the way down to the Indian Ocean, right? And then you have your coastline down there. And that's maybe the only place there's like a major coastline is down. Yeah. I don't think there's another one, anywhere. It doesn't, they're landlocked in other places. So that entire topography, it's like very tropical areas. The whole thing will change in terms of humidity and temperature and what's being grown. And I remember we took a 10-day ride from Punjab, Lahore to Karachi, and we stopped along the way throughout Sindh, through some really ancient sites. And it's like, even everything being grown. Oh, it's oranges. Okay, now it's mangoes. And as it got warmer and humid, like you just saw different stuff. And you go up north and it's completely different. Even the language is different. The food is different. I don't even know if I could communicate with the folks up north as a Punjabi. Yeah.
You hit on so much which about Pakistan, which I think is not the popular conception of the country. I think the media has portrayed Pakistan as a very specific kind of topography or geography, but the reality is that it's very diverse, and you sort of you walked us through a lot of that. And so overall, Pakistan would be divided into three rough geographic regions. Obviously, there's different areas as part of this. There is the Northern Highlands, which you talked a little bit about, and we're going to talk a little bit more about in a minute here.
Mm.
So let's move on. Sort of in that central region, there's the Indus River Plain. This would
Yeah.
be the large area that's dominated by the Indus River, and this is sort of a fun historic fact that I don't think a lot of people know. But this would be the region that one of the oldest and most ancient civilizations, known as the Indus Valley Civilization was from. And this was around the year 3300 BCE to 1300-ish BCE. And at the time was probably the most advanced civilization in the world. Like, they were doing urbanism and city making to a scale, like, this is way before the Roman Empire. This is like
irrigation. I mean, all of
irrigation.
Tool making. Yeah.
An incredible civilization. Ultimately, as civilizations do, it sort of went the way of history. They're the history books, but it's still, I think it's one of those things. It's like, wow, most people would not, I don't think, would have expected that there's such an ancient, huge civilization that was inside this area that is basically Pakistan today. And then finally, as you head farther south and sort of to that southwest region, which is sort of very mountainous, but it's also very dry. It's sort of the deserted region. It's also where Pakistan gets most of its earthquakes due to the sort of rubbing of the Indian plate and the Eurasian plates. And so typically if you hear about a big earthquake in Pakistan, it's going to be from that region, not always. But let's go back to those Northern Highlands, because this is an area that you had already alluded to as being geographically stunning. Apparently, a lot of vloggers are going there.
Yeah.
So maybe there's going to be a lot more tourism going there in the future.
Yeah.
But I have a quick question for you, Rabia. Do you know what the tallest mountain is in Pakistan?
Oh, shoot. I should know that. Is it K2?
It is K2.
Oh,
yes.
Yay.
Oh, man. That was an incredible. I mean, to me, I had always heard about K2, because every time somebody wants to talk about Mount Everest,
it's part of the. Is it part of the Himalayan mountain range, right? Or no?
Yes. Yeah. It's on that far western end. In sort of doing like research for this, I started looking into sort of what the mountains are and sort of these areas and everything like that. And obviously, Mount Everest is the tallest mountain. I'd always heard of Mount Everest and K2 sort of within the same breath. People were like talking about it. I didn't realize that they are actually pretty far away from each other. So Mount Everest is sort of in Nepal. It's sort of in that, far eastern area. And K2 is way in the far west. I had always assumed that they were like, here's
very
this
close,
one and here's right next to each other.
It's a vast mountain for sure.
It is. So it's the second tallest mountain in the world. It comes in at 8,611 meters or 28,251 feet.
Wow.
This would be very, very tall. So I have a mountain that's sort of closest to me. It's the tallest mountain in the contiguous United States, called Mount Rainier. And that mountain comes in at about 14,000 feet. So it is literally 2 times Mount Rainier, which is, again, a really tall mountain. If you ever really go by it, you'll notice the tall mountain. It's also known as, I think, Chogori, maybe locally. I don't know. That's sort of what my notes say. But K2 is probably the more globally famous name. And it exists in this far northern Pakistan-administered region of Kashmir. I'm not sure sort of how the whole political issues sort of divide that area. But as far as I can tell, it is within Pakistan.
It is squarely within Pakistan. We claim it.
Squarely within Pakistan. And it is part of a very exclusive club of mountains. They do have their own clubs called the 8,000ers, which means it's over 8,000 meters tall.
Okay.
So it's probably also worth, it's also probably worth noting here, in case any of the listeners get an idea in their head, that K2 has one of the highest death rates for climbers. So maybe don't climb it. I don't know.
I just want to go look at it from the base. I'm not a mountain climber. I'm more of a sitting in a Jeep driving through the mountain range kind of girl. But I'm going to go look at it next summer. That's the plan.
I always people are allowed to do whatever they want. It's their bodies, XYZ.
Yeah.
But I'm always like, I don't know. Like, I see like a mountain, and I have a lot of them nearby. I don't have a big climbing, intuition in me, but I'm always like, I love that mountain. I love seeing it. don't really feel the need to climb to the top of it.
Yeah. I decided, you know how people have bucket lists? And when I was younger, I'm like, I'm going to run a marathon. I'm going to do this. I'm going to be a person who hikes. Around the age of 45, when I hit 45, I was like, no, I don't want to run a marathon and I don't like hiking and I don't care if it's not cool. I will not do these things. I'm just not going to subject my
Exactly.
body to it. And so, sorry, mountains are just pretty to look at. But, much respect to the people who take on those challenges.
Well, Rabia, let's turn to the other end. You also talked a little about the coastline. So let's talk a little bit about that. What goes on down there? Is there a beach culture in Pakistan? Is there
I mean,
is it is it nice beaches?
it's not the kind of beach culture that we would think of when we think of beach culture. And honestly, the only beach I've ever been to in all of Pakistan is one called Clifton in Karachi. And it is the most popularly known beach. I mean, I think most of Pakistan's coastal region is completely empty and unexplored and undeveloped. That's my understanding. There are in Balochistan, and I mean, there are like, because again, this is a major port area. And I know China has bought up a bunch of that land and have built ports down there. And it's also a very major like trading route through there.
Mhm.
So a lot of the beaches, my understanding, is undeveloped. Now, Clifton in Karachi, the beach culture there is in the eve, nobody goes and sunbathes in the day because this is a Muslim country. That's not happening.
Yeah.
But as the sun starts going down, families just flood the beach fully dressed, but they're
Mhm.
out there taking camel rides. And I did like this sand buggy. It's like a sand dune buggy where like they put my 6-year-old like on the top of the buggy. I'm like, this can't be right. But they don't care. Like give us 200 rupees and go. But there are people just having fun and, eating. And that's the culture and waiting in so far. Like swimming is not even very much part of the culture. Like, a lot of people, I don't even know how to swim. Like it's just not part of our culture. So nobody's really going into the ocean. They're just kind
Yeah.
of waiting, with their pajamas hiked up. So there isn't a beach culture the way we think we consider it. I have heard though there are some resorts that have opened up in that region that are geared towards like Western tourists or
Mhm.
or people like me who grew up in the West and are visiting
Right.
and rediscovering their homeland. For people like me to be more comfortable, where there are like little beach umbrellas but I think that is an untapped resource as of now. Yeah, like it
Interesting.
hasn't really been developed much. I wouldn't go to
Because it's
Pakistan
quite
for
long.
beaches. I wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Because it's quite long. It's about a 500-mile.
Yeah.
Well, probably more if you factor in like all the little divots and everything, but roughly 500 miles of coastline, which is,
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's about the same as like California or something like that.
Yeah. That's pretty big. Yeah.
Anyways, we are going to now we're starting to talk about some tourist stuff, some visiting stuff. We're going to talk all about that, Rabia. But before we do that, we have to do one last ad break. So go do some capitalism, listener. Listen to some ads. Maybe it'll be a tourism ad for Pakistan. I don't know. Come back and we will finish up by talking about where Rabia suggests you visit if you ever
Mhm.
decide to go to Pakistan. So we will be right back.
Want to be because you could do a lot of Lahore in one day. There are
Mhm.
ancient Mughal sites. I mean, the Mughal structures are just stunning. The shopping's incredible. The food scene's out of this world. You could do a lot in a day. If you had more than one day and you are somebody who wants to go, doesn't want to do the city stuff. I mean, the crazy thing about Lahore is, yeah, it's a dense city, but then there's these like, oh, there's like a 500-year-old Mughal monument in the middle of like the town square. You know what I mean? Like it's such a
Yeah.
mixture. There are ancient shrines, of saints there. I think Lahore is your best one day bet to see as many different kinds of perspectives on Pakistan as possible. If you have more than that and you want to do scenic things and you want to get away from hustle bustle, you're not into shopping, then you got to go up north. You got to do Gilgit, Baltistan, Hanza. Yeah, so those would be my recommendations.
I had a feeling that you were going to say Lahore based on sort of what we've already talked about.
But
I mean, it
it
sounds like
really
a
is.
wonderful city. Yeah.
Yeah. It's very safe and clean, and there's just a lot to see. I mean, the architecture is just beautiful. There's palaces. I mean, like it's amazing.
So I typically ask this of anybody who's from Europe that I interview, but maybe I'll ask you as well. Is
Mhm.
there a specific castle or palace or anything that somebody should visit if they go there? Is there one in Lahore that's like that's the big one? Go check it out.
Oh, if you go to Lahore, I mean, if there's one thing you want to see in Lahore, it would be the Badshah Mosque complex. Okay,
Mm,
so there's a huge mosque. It's incredible. It's one of the biggest mosques in the world. It's beautiful. It's made of red sandstone, but it's part of this bigger complex where you have the Lahore Fort, and the fort is incredible. I think it's like 400 or 500 years old. I can't remember exactly. And then next to the fort, there's just all these incredible structures that are just centuries and centuries old. The fort was used by lots of different like administrations, including like royal families, then Sikh royal families, then finally the Mughals came and took it over. And they still have those huge archways where the elephants would walk through to get into the fort. And they have, so the fort, as you have to see, and they have the halls in the fort where the king would hold like, his the receptions for other royals, or the area where he would, speak to the commoners. And I mean, that's the whole complex. You could do that one day. It's stunning. So yeah, that might be it.
Wow.
If you want to see something ancient, you got to go down south and the Derawa Fort, Derawa, Derawa Fort. It is from the 9th century. It's stunning. It's in the Cholistan Desert, though. It's beautiful.
Wow. Well, listener, you might not think Pakistan is as obvious a place to visit as, say, France, for example, which is the most visited country in the world. But Pakistan does have a tourism industry, and I think you're hitting on that a little bit. In fact, I actually did a little bit of digging just to see, like, how has it grown? How's it sort of expanded? And I found that in 2010, which I guess was a little bit ago, but it's not like outlandishly long ago, the publication Lonely Planet had termed Pakistan was poised to become tourism's next big thing. And perhaps with all of these vloggers flooding into the country, it actually will become the next big thing, because that tends to happen. Condé Nast Traveler also ranked Pakistan as the best holiday destination in 2020. And as of 2018, this is the most recent statistics I have, about 6.6 million people visited the country, which is, again, I think more than maybe the average listener would expect. I think this is probably, yeah.
It is an industry that's tourism is an industry that's young, but it's growing really fast. And I think a lot of it is also spurred by the fact that those of us who grew up away from Pakistan now have children. We're taking them back. We're educated professionals. We want to go back, and we don't want our kids to be disconnected.
Right.
We're taking people with us. There's a lot of great travel agencies. I teamed up with one called Adventure Travel Pakistan. They do a lot of tours up north. But I said to them, I want a custom tour planned from Punjab, from Lahore to Karachi, and they did that. And I took a group of Americans and one Canadian who none of them had ever been anywhere in South Asia. So this was like their first foray in South Asia. And we had an incredible time this past January. And next year, I'm going to go with another group of folks who have not been to that region, hopefully up north. Yeah, definitely visit.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely amazing. I love the idea of people. I mean, you hear about, places like Barcelona being over touristed, and Amsterdam, and like maybe Tokyo as well. Like these places that are being over touristed. And like, I just want to, I know these places are really great and there's a lot of really good, cool things to see, but I'm like, there's so much of the world that if you have some precious time to go spend and experience another culture, choose someplace that maybe doesn't get over touristed, where they would welcome you and sort of love to share their culture. And like, maybe Pakistan is that right now.
Pakistan is one of the people of Pakistan, especially when it comes to folks that are clearly not from Pakistan, are incredibly hospitable, incredibly. You will get invitations over and over to eat in people's homes, and vendors will not take your money when you're buying food on the street. I mean, like, they're really, really welcoming and kind. And, you talked about the media coverage. I'll never forget. I don't know if it was 2000. It was maybe a few years after 9/11. And Pakistan made the cover of Newsweek as the most dangerous country in the world. And it was like this face of this really angry man in a protest. And I'm like, no, all my Pakistani relatives are worried about us getting involved in a mass shooting in America. It's pretty safe, and that portrayal has always bothered me. So I really appreciate you featuring Pakistan on today's episode.
Absolutely. I found this one really funny fact about tourism. So in Pakistan, 6.6 million people in 2018 visited the country, that was a new height for the country. Yeah. Hopefully it's gone even higher. But I did note that apparently this is down from the 1970s, when apparently something called the hippie trail drove millions of people through the country.
I believe that. And Pakistan's gone through a lot of like really interesting cultural changes. If you look at like photos of Karachi and the major cities in the 1950s, like you're talking about women like wearing like sleeveless clothes and mini skirts, like at university. And then we went through like kind of this Islamic revolution that happened in the 80s and 90s, and everything got really restrictive. And now things are getting like more liberal again. Like, it's so much of what is actually happening in the country is based on who is in power politically. I mean, I guess that's not too different from the rest of the world.
Yeah. that tracks with a lot of places,
Yeah, yeah,
United
yeah,
States included,
yeah, yeah.
unfortunately. Well, as we sort of close out today, Rabia, I just have one final question. What is one thing about Pakistan that you know, but you think nobody not from there would ever know?
I think people would never guess that Pakistan. See, people have this concept of Pakistan as being this real wing fundamentalist Muslim country. Pakistan is the heart of, it's called the land of saints. Multan is a city that's known as the city of saints. They say 1,000 saints are buried there. When I talk about saints, I talk about Sufi saints. And people don't know that Sufism is like this esoteric practice of Islam that is all centered around like love and music and acceptance. And in those Sufi shrines, Hindus visit it, Christians visit it. Like there's like this incredible culture of religious solidarity around Sufi culture and tradition. And I've always wanted to do kind of a tour of Sufi shrines there. And so the manifestation of like the cultural aspects of like Sufi tradition and stuff, people are completely unaware of. But it explains a little bit about why the hippie trail went through there, because
Yeah.
it's the kind of thing that hippies would go to. You know, the hippies are like, where are the Buddhists and where's the shrines and the ashrams? Well, they're in Pakistan.
Yeah. Fascinating.
Yeah.
Absolutely wonderful. Rabia, this has been such a fun exploration of Pakistan. I am enamored with the country after doing my own research and after talking with you. I think it's
Come with me on the tour next year, Geoff.
I might look that up. In fact, Rabia, tell people where they can find you on the internet, as well as share that information about your trip again for us, please, so I can also remember it.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can find me on Instagram is where I'm probably most active. It's Rabia squared SQAR spelled out with the number 2. Don't ask why, but it's Rabia squared 2. And you know, I organized one tour for earlier this year. When I start organizing the tour for next year, believe me, you'll find it on there. I'll be posting constantly about the tour. We haven't decided on dates yet, but it's going to be, we'll be landing in Islamabad, that's sleepy little capital city, and going up north from there. But I also want to, before we get off, plug, but also share with people, because I think it is important that my memoir was published 2 years ago, and it's called Fatty Fatty Boom Boom. I've got it right here, and I wrote this memoir around my personal life versus my professional life, because I wanted to use this book as a vehicle to introduce people to the culture and language and food of Pakistan. It's also about growing up heavy and trying to get away from the food of every country. But there's recipes in here. So if you love food memoirs, and you're going to learn a lot about Pakistan and Lahore and Punjab from this book. And I think it's a great introduction to the country, because I also talk about the history and the ethnic divides and all that stuff too.
Well, listener, all of those links, Rabia's trips, her Instagram, and a link to where you can find her book will be in the show notes if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever, or on the description of the YouTube if you're watching on YouTube. So go check those out and engage sort of with Rabia elsewhere outside of this podcast, I guess. This has been really fun exploring Pakistan. I really enjoyed it. Next week, come back. We're going to talk all about France. We're going to go back to Europe, talk all about France. Should be really fun as we sort of dive into the history of that place. And I guess until then, well, we'll see you next time.
Thanks so much, Geoff.